Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar about the Product Security Officer, the roles and responsibilities. My name is David Barzilai. I am the Karamba Securities Executive Chairman and co-founder. And thank you all for coming here, as well as thank you for the distinguished panel team that we have here today. When we launched this initiative of product security webinar about 2 weeks ago, a little less than that, we did not anticipate. We knew it was quite an important session that sparks interest globally, but we did not estimate the number of registrants that eventually registered for this webinar. We have 220 registrants for this webinar, coming from different verticals, such as Industry 4.0, automotive, storage providers, networking providers, Web 2 companies, silicon companies, edge and IoT devices. What was quite interesting was also to see the global spread of attendees and registrants for this webinar. Registrants came obviously from the Americas, so we have people coming from the US, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. We have from Europe, Germany, Spain, Italy, Sweden, UK, France, and Switzerland, and even Asia, despite of the time difference. We have attendees here from Japan, South Korea, China, Saudi Arabia, India, and Israel. And to represent Africa, we even have representatives from South Africa. But I'm sure that nobody came to listen to me, but rather to the panelists that we have here. And we have, as I said, quite a good set of speakers, an excellent set of speakers representing two main verticals that product security is core to them. Two from the automotive sector and two from the Industry 4.0, and I just go one by one alphabetically. We have Mr. Jürgen Borg, Senior Product Security Leader and Strategist from Volvo Cars. We have Mr. Jason Christman, VP and Product Security Officer from Johnson Controls. We have Mr. Bill Mazzara, Cybersecurity Strategist at Fiat Chrysler, but he's not representing Fiat Chrysler here, but rather the ISO SAE Vehicle Cybersecurity Engineering Work Group, the standard body, where he serves as a voting member. And we obviously have, Miss Megan Sanford, Director for Product Security and Safety at Rockwell Automation. In terms of the structure of this webinar today, we're going to start with introductions. Each panelist will introduce himself and herself. We're going to then talk about the Chief Product Security Officer or Product Security Officer versus the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. Continue with standards, specifically de facto standards and how they affect product security program. Then we'll talk about product security as differentiation for the company, and conclude with the product security program that each one of the speakers will talk about in terms of their view of it, and specifically about controls that should be taken in order to enable the product to be secure. And then in terms of housekeeping points, then the attendees cannot activate the video cameras, nor they can unmute themselves. But in order to interact with the panel team, then each one of you has a small button with the title Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You can, at any time of this webinar, push the button and click your question to the panelists. And towards the end of the meeting, I hope we have enough time to go over the questions raised by the audience. So with that, we'll start with the personal introductions of the speakers, and we go alphabetically, as I said. We start with Mr. Jürgen Borg from Volvo Cars. Jürgen, please. Jürgen, you're on mute.
Hello everyone, my name is Jürgen Borg. I work at the central product cybersecurity team at Volvo Cars. I have 10 years experience of automotive product cybersecurity within research, advanced engineering, and technology introductions. I'm an automotive expert and representative in different working groups as ISO, ASEA, AutoISAC in UNEC.
Next slide, Emil.
And sorry, the first slide, thank you. Can we go back, please? So Volvo Cars is a global company and have representations in both Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific with both manufacturing and research and development facilities. And we sold about 700,000 vehicles last year and have 42,000 employees. Next slide, please. So at Volvo Cars, we have made it our mission to take back the feeling of freedom and let the car be the enabler for a richer life. We will do so by offering mobility, regardless of what that looks like or who wants to use it. We want to democratize mobility by giving all our fans freedom to move in a personal, sustainable, and safe way. So we commit to pioneering the safest, most intelligent technology solutions in mobility and everyday life to protect what is important to people. And these things are connected, and that is why we treat product cybersecurity seriously, and it is and has always been a key area. Thank you, guys from Volvo Cars.
Thank you very much, Jorgen. We'll continue with Jason Chrisman from Johnson Controls.
Hello, everyone. So I lead product security at Johnson Controls. I've been doing software and product security for the majority of my career. Our company has been around for over 130 years. We operate in over 150 different countries, and 90% of the world's most iconic buildings have our technologies inside. So naturally, given that, you can imagine that cybersecurity is essential to any smart building company with a portfolio of connected products and services. Things like HVAC, fire detection, fire protection, physical security controls, and digital solutions. The picture you see here is the picture of our global headquarters in Cork, Ireland. This building is Ireland's smartest building. It has some very innovative features, things like rainwater harvesting and treatment, solar reflective energy. It has intelligent lighting, distributed energy, smart elevators that harvest energy, and the list goes on. So naturally, you have a very heavily connected technology environment and ecosystem within a building like that. Again, demonstrating the need for strong cybersecurity to maintain those goals of efficiency, sustainability, safety, and productivity. And you'll recognize some of our most famous brands at the bottom. Next slide, please. So a little bit of my vision on product security. There's a lot on this slide, but naturally, product security across the industry has been in a rapid evolution over the last few years. And I'll just sum up with saying that I look at this, both cyber and privacy, across the entire life cycle of our products and at every level of the stack. And I've structured the program with governance, assurance, and other functions that help support that larger mission goal. And later in the conversation, we'll talk about some specific product features and the lifecycle process. Thank you. And finally, a little bit more on the lifecycle. One key point to remember that this is a partnership. Suppliers, integrators, and operators all must work together to solve this challenge. This isn't a sell it and forget it mindset. This is something that we're all in the same boat together. And that you have to understand your customer's risk framework. Different than the IT security world where you're looking at your own enterprise. Here in product security, we're looking at someone else's, the market, the customer's enterprise, and how we can help them solve their cyber risk management challenges. Okay, back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Jason. Now we're going to move to Bill Mazzara that will describe the ISO SAE work group.
Hello, I'm Bill Mazzara. I'm coming to you to present the ISO SAE 21434. This was recently published in February. It's published as a draft international standard, but is available to the public for all to read and review. It represents the work of more than 100 experts from 16 nations across many companies, really forming the first ever consensus across the auto industry of what cybersecurity engineering processes should look like for vehicle cybersecurity. It is meant to uniquely describe cybersecurity processes for the vehicle as a product, which is distinct from enterprise information security. Really, it is meant to lay the groundwork of cybersecurity management systems for the products an organization may create in the auto industry.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now Megan. Yes,
Hi everyone, sorry about that. I have a 4-year-old in the house, so we may experience a little bit of an interruption, but I'll start off with that caveat. I'm very pleased to be here this morning. Thank you so much, David, for the invite, and I'm very happy to be on the panel with Jason and Bill and others here. We hope to give you all an interesting perspective today on the emerging role of Chief Product Security Officers and the role that we see product security offices playing within organizations. I think 15, 20 years ago, this conversation was very much developing from the CISO side of the house, from the Chief Information Security Officer perspective, and that area has grown, and we've seen the benefit that it's provided organizations. And so I think similarly, again, thank you, David, for kind of raising this, because we're absolutely seeing a similar trend on the product security side of the house. So to kick it off, again, as I mentioned, I'm Megan Sanford. I'm the Global Director of both Product Safety and Security for Rockwell Automation. So Rockwell is unique in that we keep safety and security together because we believe it foundationally is an element of quality within our products. With that, Rockwell Automation, many of you identify us as also Allen Bradley with our controller line and our Rockwell Automation software business. We've been around for actually over 116 years. We're the largest company in the world that's solely dedicated to industrial automation. And so we're a company that's very heavily invested in bringing what we refer to as the connected enterprise to life with our customer base. And so again, you see kind of our testimony on how much we believe that this is where everything is going in the future, and that we want to be a part of these conversations and be participating in thought leadership opportunities like this. So with that, a little bit about our program, and I think generally product security programs in general is how I'm going to be approaching the conversation, is building a good program. To date, there's no manual or handbook that says these are the correct elements of how a company should structure a product security program. We'll go into a little bit of that today, right? You have your overall program structure, your governance, risk and compliance, your training, understanding the threats that may be facing both your internal organization in partnership with your CISO, but as well as your customer base and being on the lookout for that. Understanding technologies that are emerging and how those can be incorporated into product build, KPIs, understanding that data coming off of the program should be used as fuel rather than exhaust on processes, building and designing safe and secure product capabilities, secure boot, authentication, authorization, execution at runtime. These are fundamental table stakes of good product development and control design. SIP security, upgrading to secure protocols that we know are going to take us much further into the future, 20, 30 years out. Controls validation, right? Everything that you did in making the product and building the features in. How do you ensure proper controls are in place prior to that product shipping, that you know that you're handing off a quality product to the customer? Vulnerability handling and disclosure. One of the first elements that programs create are product security incident response teams. That's normally the initial kind of cornerstone piece, if you will, for how many of these programs emerge. Incident response plans. If you've heard about using incident command system for industrial control systems, that's another big proponent area. And finally, thought leadership. All of this and understanding that operating in the Chief Product Security Officer role, that you're acting as an ambassador for the security and safety of your brand and of your company, and importantly, your products. With that, we back up what we say we're going to do. We seek independent third-party certification from companies like TUV, Rhineland, and others. ISA Secure offers it as well, saying that you're going to certify your processes and your products and the way that you deliver system and customer environments. And finally, working together as a community through groups like the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance. And finally, shout out to women in cybersecurity. We certainly need more women in OT cybersecurity as well. So thank you. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Megan. So let's start. Actually, maybe I'll ask it, the difference between the Chief Product Security Officer versus the CISO.
Sure. This is Jason. I can jump in while we wait for Megan to come back. If you have that slide that I shared with you earlier, David, we can use as a visual. So there's a number of areas that I see as different in terms of viewpoints of risk, value propositions, investment priorities and strategies, where the budget comes from, how you execute. So a number of them are listed here on the slide, and I'll just draw your attention to a few that really stand out to me. Right. So naturally, given product security, you're looking at the product, you're looking at the customer and what the risk is around that. But also my entire program is structured around not just how the product operates in the customer space, but all those front leaning things I can do on design development to build the right controls in. So with that customer's risk framework in mind. Another thing that I'll call to your attention is how we look at it across that life cycle, and that we do want to standardize to a baseline. We also clearly want to differentiate. Every company wants to have a better product, a better mousetrap. And so how can we use cybersecurity to do that too? And so we're looking to maximize product value, not just minimize cost. We're looking at that cost balance there. And of course, what I always tell my team is focus on the developer experience so they can drive speed to market, and focus on the customer experience so you can deliver maximum value. And there's a number of other items on the slide, but I'll turn it back to Megan if she has some thoughts.
No, thank you. And as predicted, and I apologize for that interruption, but where I was going with my train of thought is that for many companies, what I think you're going to see in the future is, as I said in the introduction, CISOs have been around for 15 or 20 years. They serve a vital role. They are really the backbone of information and security within a company's core team. And with that, we see very centralized governance structures. It's not really a division of labor issue in many cases, and that CISOs have medium to, in some cases, larger security teams that report directly up through them, and they need that to ensure governance, risk, and compliance roles within the organization, as well as aiding as a productivity mechanism with development and other groups within the org. With chief product security officers, in many cases, the teams can be smaller than CISOs, not necessarily, that's not a hard and steady rule by any means, but we tend to focus on designing requirements for the product and then validating the controls that have been put in place. And when you need a function to control, to provide controls validation, what you'll often see is what I call kind of centralized shared services teams, like red teams, vulnerability assessment teams. Open source software is becoming very big, obviously, running teams that can operate tooling to scan for open source and then disposition those findings correctly, as well as what I think is really a cool part of the job, quite frankly, is speaking on behalf of the products, being an evangelist within the industry for enhanced product security within all products, maybe not just your own companies, and demonstrating that thought leadership that raises the conversation to the right level, and within your own company, with your own internal stakeholders, right? Kind of the point that Jason brought up earlier, viewing this from an internal customer, voice of the customer standpoint, from working with developers and ensuring they have the right training and tooling in mind, but also the viewpoint from your external customers, the end user, meaning, are we building security into the product in such a way that the customer is delighted, that the functionality is there, that they know that both safety and security are being addressed within the product, and the product is very capable of meeting the compliance standards that we see coming out. So that's where I was going with that, but I think it's very much a CISO and a CIPSO strategy, and you're going to see the emergence of both roles in what I would term more mature organizations.
Thank you. And actually, Bill, a question to you, although this is not an ISO question, but more an FCA question, but I don't think it's something, are you interfacing with the CISO?
Yeah, so I mean, we define product cybersecurity very explicitly in 21434, and there was an effort to put a boundary around what a product is. A product is very clearly something that an organization builds many of and distributes, but at the same time expects only a few or some users of. Whereas an enterprise CISO is really concerned about what conceptually we consider the one enterprise information system. And so what we've done with 21434 is to explicitly define a risk to the product users. We call it the road user in the document. And that's to consider the driver of the vehicle, but not just the driver of the vehicle, other users of the vehicle, which may not even be in the vehicle. It may be things like passengers, or maybe things like fleet operations, which consider the products that we sell. So it is definitely a tightrope to walk. There is an interface that needs to exist there. It needs to be understood that products a company sell may come back to affect the company's enterprise operations. But most importantly is there are times that there are actions the enterprise may take which affect the users of the product and go back the other way to become product cybersecurity.
I see. Thank you. And so with regards, and this is actually, that's a nice segue to the next part. Jürgen, did you also want to comment on that?
I just want to comment that a success factors at Volvo Cars has really been, if you don't, at the lower organizational levels, when it comes to the CISO organization, to have a cross-functional collaboration and with product development teams, and really be cross-functional and share knowledge and experience and so on. So that's really a success factor to not have silos in each organization, but to be cross-functional.
So product security is not silo-based, but needs to view the entire departments of the company. Okay, very good. Then, so thank you very much, all of you. And then the next topic is, we have a lot to discuss that, and actually I think we can allocate much more time just to that topic, but we have many more things to cover. The next topic is with regards to standards. Now, I think there are two types of standards. One is those that are formal and ratified, and that's kind of like a no-brainer. Once there is a ratified standard, we must adhere to it, we must comply with it. We have auto justification to ask for investment in order to comply with it and stuff like that. I would like to focus on the little more sensitive topics with regards to, let's start with standards that haven't been ratified yet. Those that, so are you waiting for them to be ratified, or are you already starting to impose some discipline within the organization to meet those standards even before ratification, before becoming formal? And if you do, how do you justify excessive costs in order to do that? Who would like to answer that?
Well, I can start from at least the perspective of ISO SAE. This is why we chose to publish the draft. The document is not, as you say, ratified. There's a lot of consensus there, but there are still discussions going on, changes to be expected. But the demand was so great by the companies around the world and the regulatory bodies around the world to have that document out and available to the public, that the joint working group came to the conclusion that publishing the draft was appropriate and suitable for the world to have it.
Okay, thank you. So publish before, so companies will be able to view it and to start implementing it. And anyone else? Again, standards that are not ratified yet, are you meeting them, or and how you justify the investment?
Jason, yeah, I'll jump in and say that, look, I mean, if those or those published but pre-ratified standards are available to us, we're going to start positioning and preparing for that. Now, there's a number of things that we can do, right, in terms of processes, procedures, looking at how the different modular components of our products, and does it align to our product strategy? But when it comes down to individual products, it always depends, right? Is there interoperability? Is there backward compatibility? What kind of costs are involved? But if where the standard is heading is aligned to best practices and it's an industry trend and we know it's going to better serve the customer, we're going to do everything we can to position ourselves and be ready for that.
Okay, thank you.
And I can add that, I mean, at Volvo Cars now we are very actively monitoring because the whole industry is evolving, and especially when it comes to the ISO standard that Bill mentioned, and the lead times are so long, so you cannot actually wait. So you need to take the latest baseline, try to understand, align, and then foresee when it's stable to incorporate it in the design early and consider the whole product life cycle actually. So it's otherwise it will be too late and costly to and maybe impossible to introduce it.
Okay, thank you. And actually, with regards to the standards coming from the industrial standards, we have a few questions, but one of them is with regards to the Industry 4.0 standards, and maybe given that Jason already commented, maybe Megan will address. Could you please comment on the adoption of the IEC 62443 and the ISA Secure? Why is it too slow? And do we need regulations similar to the NERC?
I don't think it's too slow. I think there just wasn't enough awareness around that particular standard. And now there's a lot of traction growing with the emergence of the ISA Global Cyber Alliance. And frankly, looking at all the suppliers and end users that are now getting on board with that standard. You know, ISA 99 working group's been around for a long time working on this. So it's fairly mature. It's still got room to grow. But I think the key piece is showing how that standard dovetails with NIST Cyber Framework, with the NIST 800 series, with the other international standards that are out there. There isn't one standard that rules them all. It really is a puzzle that comes together and shows how the layers of a technology stack work and how you get edge to cloud security.
Thank you.
Jason, that was an excellent response. And I think that you're right, because people tend to view standards in a mutually exclusive way when they're not at all. We see the CISO side of the house very much speaking in terms of communicating risk through the NIST framework. I think it's a great framework. I think it's easy. I think it resonates with a lot of people. 62443 is different from NIST in that NIST is a way to view risk, whereas 62443 is very prescriptive with 4-2 for features that should be built into a product with security levels that you're trying to achieve. 4-1 is about product development. 3-3 is about secure reference architectures. We're seeing a big uptick in the 3-3 pull, as Jason mentioned, with the edge to cloud scenarios. This is being driven by customer demand. We're seeing that pull. That's wonderful. Last year, Rockwell Automation was the first company in the world to have the first industrial certified controller with 4-2 certification. We didn't necessarily view 62443 as a bet we were making, hoping that in the future customers would appreciate the fact that we wanted the certification, we wanted the compliance. We viewed it as simply, this is a part of providing a quality product. But our company, again, all we do is industrial control systems and automation. So for us, this was everything. This was our testament to our brand. It's how our company operates. In terms of adoption, I do think that it is an education piece. As Jason mentioned, the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance, for the first time in the world, you're seeing the automation vendors come together, not as competitors, but as companies that want to get together and have conversations just like this, the conversation that you're bringing up today, David. And so we can communicate through these forums and really put on our thought leadership hat and figure out how can we continue to positively incentivize the adoption throughout industry rather than using other means such as regulation and things like that. But I do think more regulation in the space is coming. You generally see it in the power vertical. Next follow will probably be water, and then so on and so forth.
Beautiful, thank you. And actually in that spirit, there's also a question for Bill. With regards to the 21434, what level of collaboration and contribution was received from major automotive players?
21434, yeah, was, as I said in the introduction, developed by something like 80 different companies in several different nations throughout the world. It really does represent a consensus amongst, for the most part, all of the auto industry.
Excellent, thank you. And my last question in that topic. So again, standards that are ratified or will be ratified are easy because it's clear. If you don't do it, you're out of game. Do you also view, do you have any visibility to de facto standards, standards that the industry is requiring you? So they're not official standards, but they are requirements coming up from major customers. How do you even analyze them? What's your data point or input? And how do you convince your organizations to meet them, if there are any?
David, in my mind, I think it goes back to just the element of quality. We have statistics and we know what the data tells us, and that $1 spent in secure development training is going to pay off 4 times dividends later down the road. In other words, we know that by shifting left, we're benefiting internally because we're making better products and we're finding issues earlier in the design process, and we're able to remediate them earlier. There's one statistic I'm trying to pull from memory, but I believe the saying goes, and maybe Bill or Jason or Jorgen, you could help me here, but a vulnerability found early in the development life cycle of a product will factor in, engineering hours is less than $500 to fix. However, a vulnerability that's found once a product is fielded in a customer environment, we're getting upwards of tens of thousands of dollars. I wouldn't be surprised with some of the disclosures we've seen lately that really crossed industry, that crossed everyone, that the response is going to be in the millions of dollars, right? If you look at it from a holistic industry perspective. So we know that by putting in the effort on the front end, it pays off internally. And on the back end, again, if you go back to the voice of the customer experience, it's a better experience for them. And the standards are a collective vehicle by which we can all be moving forward together.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just add one thing, David. When we look at these different standards as part of our requirements analysis, there's a considerable amount of overlap in the controls. Each one has a particular flavor to a vertical or a particular type of technology, but the general controls, there's a lot of overlap. So for us, when we do our requirements analysis and we start to build that security architecture and threat model, we then fold those in. And so it makes sense that even though it may be a de facto standard or it's not fully ratified, that majority of that can be satisfied just by meeting our baseline.
Yeah, I like to say that if you can build security in from the beginning virtually for free. And that is really the point that 21434 is making, is that it just creates a framework to build security in from the outset of your project. You draw two boxes on a sheet of paper and connect them with a line. You've started your security analysis. And that is what you would need to do with any de facto standard, any new technology, anything that you can even remotely associate with your product. You need to build into that security analysis as you develop your product, so that you can take advantage of building security in from the beginning.
Yes, Jorgen.
Yeah, I can add, Maggie had some really good example, because it is also, when you introduce something like this, it's a competition internally in the organization. You compete on the funding, and since security is not really, at least in the automotive industry, easy to communicate to the customer, do not do that specifically. So you really need to have these ballpark figures and examples about the cost, because it's a lot about the return on investment, but what about the negative ROI?
And I would like just to add one comment with regards to the cost of vulnerabilities. There is a publicly shared video from Microsoft that they estimated that every security vulnerability, especially the in-memory ones that are harder to catch, costs at least $150,000 to fix, and there are few of them. when we had a few of our customers shared with us very similar numbers when they try to justify, because after all, cybersecurity is an added cost. And the question, as Jürgen said, there's kind of a competition on resources. Why do we need to put it, on the product security and not on other things? So that's quite quite an important topic. The next topic I'd like to cover is differentiation. And then, so with differentiation, the question is cybersecurity just a matter of compliance or also a matter of marketing? Do we need it for to put us ahead of the pack or something like that? And actually, I'd like to start with Jürgen, because I think with Volvo cars, Volvo was excellent in coining safety as a differentiator in terms of branding and value to the customer. So, Jürgen, from your point of view, is cybersecurity is a differentiator, or we just need to be on par with the rest of the industry?
No, like I said in the presentation, we take it really seriously and have done a lot of research during the years, but it's more expected. You do not specifically communicate it to the customer. It's hard, at least in the automotive industry. And we know that there are a lot of research in upcoming vehicle ratings like 5-star and other similar frameworks. But for us, I mean, in the industry now, it's a huge challenge to get these standards implemented and organized. And we see that there's a lot of different maturity in the landscape, in the supply landscape. So we strive for really this industry challenge to facilitate that and implement the ISO standard and the UNEC regulation. Then you get the really good minimum level, but not to have it as a competitive factor, more to really solve the joint challenge.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I'll just jump in and say, sure, it's a differentiator because OT security is still rather nascent writ large, and there's a lot of legacy brownfield infrastructure out there, particularly in the other industries. So, it's not something in our space where you brag about cybersecurity. That's rule number one: don't brag about it, right? But what you do want to do is, if you're going to put all the hard effort and rigor and design into your product and make those investments, you want to then go forward and get your product certified and be able to make those assurances to your customers. You've done your homework, you've thought this through, and you're a committed partner to them to help manage risk. Nothing's perfect in a product or a service, but if something does go wrong, that you've got the foundation in place to support them through that incident or through that response or through that upgrade that they're going through.
Do you see customers? I'll tell you what we heard. We did the survey, right, among product security officers. But before I tell you that, do you see customers requiring cybersecurity?
I do. It's becoming a condition of sale in some cases, particularly the regulated industries.
Yeah, you can see that as a trend in regulation in the auto industry, particularly look at the work of the UNECE.
Yeah, you get, and especially if something is in the news, like the relay attack, you can get a lot of questions, and people getting more and more aware. And then you don't know if it's a end customer, if it's a report, right? But yeah, there was some awareness building actually in this industry as well.
I think everything in our world today tells us that security matters to everyone. I think in a digital society, I think that security is something that should be understood by the masses, from people operating operational technology environments and ICS to people driving vehicles to even kindergartners, operating tablets and things. Kindergartners can tell you a 9-digit password before they can recite their alphabet. I think that this is the new world that we're living in, and it's absolutely an expectation. And we view it as this is the world. This is what we build to. I was in a meeting at one point, and there were several automation vendors in the world, and a gentleman piped up and said, I look forward to the day that companies view security as a market differentiator, as they view it as a competitive advantage. And then someone from another industry said, I'll be happy at the day that you don't view it as a competitive advantage, right? So it was really interesting to see that paradigm in that some people think that we're where things are where they should be today, and other people you know, still think that there's a long way to go, I guess. I think that it should just become part of everyday life.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And then the next topic is, and we try to keep some rapid tempo here, right? To cover them deeply enough and move to the other topics that are also of interest. The next topic is the topic of the product security program. What led to this webinar was a survey that we conducted with customers and non-customers. We did this survey among quite a few product security officers for multiple industries. And what was quite enlightening was that regardless of the industry and regardless of, you know, the location, and they all came with quite similar framework of a product security program, meaning that what needs to be implemented in order to assure the right level of the product security, right? For the products being left in the hands of the end customer. The foundations for this program were four. It was the product security governance, and then the secure SDLC, the secure software development lifecycle, then the embedded controls to assure that the product is protected as much as possible in runtime, and then the operations, post-production until end of life. To the right of this slide, there are the measures and processes put in place, but just as examples, as part of those building blocks of the product security program. So the first question to the panel is, what do you think is the right mix between the, in terms of time and resources being allocated, in terms of between improving the software development lifecycle versus the security controls?
I'll jump in and just say, I think, you know, we discussed this earlier, the more you spend up front to get the design right and the governance of that design and development and testing, you're going to save in the long run. But at the flip side, you have to have a balanced approach. You have to be flexible and agile. If an incident blows up in your face, you have to be ready to surge to meet that demand and that need. And so I wouldn't say one is more important than the other, because they're all critical. But I would probably invest more on the upfront side to make sure you're on a very solid foundation, and then with the ability to be flexible.
Thank you.
The organizational investment is one of the points that ISO SAE 21434 is making. Is the point that it drives home is to create a cybersecurity management system as an organization to cover your products, a framework to cover all products, the entire fleet of vehicles that an OEM may produce, or you know, or whatever your products may be, to be honest. And what that does is it really sets up a strong point about setting policies so that you can make those sort of calm decisions in a clean room, rather than making a frantic decision at the time that something maybe has to do, and you're pressured by cost and timing and media and all the other things that go on in life.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting to see the way that the programs are emerging from a program development standpoint. Again, the point that I made, that there's no manual, there's no handbook on how to stand up a product security program yet, right? One thing where I've seen companies be successful is implementing what I call a lines of defense strategy, where your first line of defense is your developer. They're the person making the product. That's within the product line. They're the people that need to understand and intimately appreciate both safety and security and build that into the product, and having clear requirements and an understanding of how to do it. Your second line of defense becomes kind of a centralized product security office working in collaboration with CISO and others within the company, that again, you're setting a strategy, you're providing the tooling, you're trying to improve the user experience of the developers within your company. And then lastly, the third line of defense is like internal audit, right? That they're going back through the entire process and looking at traceability to say, did we do everything that we say we were going to do? And that's the controls validation side I think we're talking about. If you look at it from the product security feature standpoint, again, you're going to incorporate lots of voice of the customer feedback on what's going to delight the customer. What do we consider to be a table stakes security feature that is non-negotiable that we're going to have versus something that may be more cutting edge, that may be something we need to consider for future road mapping and future capabilities, where we're getting that direct voice of the customer input. And then I saw within the Q&A, you see 62443 certifications, especially on 4-2 product side. When will we get to, security level 4, right? In other words, there are benchmarks being set in a number of different ways that are driving positive behavior for our programs, and we absolutely embrace it. But it's a lot of variety, and it's very multifaceted.
Excellent, thank you. And Jürgen?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a good descriptions on what needs to be in place, and I think it's not a silver bullet, and a real challenge in the automotive and in your product development is the balancing act you actually have, depending on which system is it exposed to critical, which domain does it reside in, and you need to balance it towards complexity and cost and so on. So it's this balancing act is quite a challenge.
So actually this leads to a question that came from the audience, right? Who is your best internal partner? Is it the R&D? Is it product management? Is it legal? Because you must comply with some SLAs. Who's your best supporter within the organization?
I'm friendly with all of them.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I don't want to pick. I mean, like right off the bat, of course, I would say like, it's my CISO, like I think that we have a wonderful partnership, and it's a really unique thing that we've created in the way that our teams work together. Legal is always there. I mean, if you're a product security office and you don't have a great relationship with your legal counsel, I think that that's something you'd want to revisit, because they're a wonderful advocate. And the business level leadership, right? I think that business level leadership and the executives in your company that understand that this is the way that we want to do business. This is an element of quality. This is something that can't be negotiated. Having executives that understand that, in my mind, is everything, because everyone else is going to follow suit if they understand that the leaders of the company are vocally saying that this is a priority for them.
All of those functions are part of the business and the product strategy, and we just kind of dovetail and align with it. So we work very closely with all of them.
And maybe it's not so much politically correct, but I don't want all of you to kind of like go back home and have new enemies, God forbid. But do you see some objections coming from product delivery teams? Kind of like, I have a timeline to meet, a budget, now you add more duties on my plate, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time. So because there is a lot of, it's even if it's long lead times in the automotive industry, there's a lot of tasks that you need to do and address. And then now you're building a lot more awareness, and it's even a demand and regulatory-wise to introduce these technologies. And it's still a thing to learn. So yeah, I think that is very important.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much. As still part of that chapter of the discussion, I want to say something. When we have a customer that joined the role of product security officer quite recently. And in order to, we realized that what he wanted to do was to try to overcome some internal objections. And the way to do it was actually try to go on the more somewhat easier task, meaning let's fix processes. Because processes, you can explain the rationale, and above all, they don't cost money. But then after that comes the next, and all of you are actually in a far more advanced phase. And I want to ask you about controls, because the embedded security control, they require changes to the product architecture. They require additional budgets. So with that, I'd like to ask you, what are the most impactful or effective controls that you have or you plan to implement as part of your program?
This is something that can help out with standardization. While this is not 21434, the SAE has also published another document, and its number is J3101, which is hardware protected security for ground vehicles. This is a document that the auto industry pulled together in a consensus between both automakers and silicon vendors to develop a list, a set of useful controls and circumstances in which they may be used in automotive products as you seek to solve problems within your product security strategy. I mean, but that is where I will wrap it back around again, is that it's not a mandatory list. There is no secret recipe that says if you follow steps this, and that, you will have cybersecurity. You need to go back to having that product cybersecurity team and organization, building policies and setting strategy for your particular product to select the controls that suit your product best.
Thank you. And I think there's a slide that Jason created. Amir, if you can load it, upload it, please. Jason would like to go over it. And also, I think Megan related to it in her opening remarks.
Sure. These are just a few categories of the kinds of embedded controls you might find on an OT device. And I'm sure there are others people can think of. But what I like to look at in terms of the technology stack, right? What are those things that are just underpinning that you need to have that support all the others? And now I wouldn't necessarily put all of this into a temperature probe, but for a very complex building automation system, certainly you'd want to have more of these controls built within that capability for a customer. Nowadays, with everything getting connected, becoming digital, doing discrete analytics at the edge, you're going to have secure storage. You're going to have secure remote update. You're going to have to make sure the memory doesn't get corrupted. So when you look at the items and categories on this list, it starts to fold into your technology strategy for your product in terms of making sure it can perform its basic functions.
Thank you. And I think, Megan, in your opening remarks, you also mentioned some of these, right? If I recall.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, all of this, yes. And I'd say just to double down on the secure comms piece, you're going to see a transition from the legacy install bases where customers are interested in upgrading to have secure comms. For us, we offer that through SIP Secure. There are other secure protocols that are coming available to the market now, and it's going to be a game of interoperability in the customer environments and more of the pursuit of, again, the wing-to-wing system security, that 3-3 reference architecture, as we see apps and other kind of new innovation in the field, apps being running on edge controllers, apps being run in the cloud. What the delivery of that information looks like to the customer, knowing that it's being delivered in a secure way to protect their data. We're going to see all of this, and this is an exciting time to be in the industry because we're seeing the market pull where customers are expecting these features to be present. Another area I'll do a double click on is the security logging, the event logging, right? So if something happens within the OT network, I think we're all trying to make it a better experience for our customer and understanding what the alerts and the events are, and if that is managed at an individual OT site, or if that's something that that gets sent up to a SIEM or a SOC that's managed from the enterprise side.
Yeah, and Megan, I'll just add on that topic of interoperability and the logging. Many of the CISOs I talk to in our customer spaces, they want to see their OT products are interoperable with their security infrastructure. They want to have that larger visibility into where the risk lies and what assets are managed and versus unmanaged. So that's becoming more important for our types of technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. CISOs live by the CMDB, right? And on the OT side of the house, we're getting there. We can offer that to customers, right? And I think this becomes more of a strategy on how do you delight the customer and not offering just kind of a basic package in that, but how do they get wing-to-wing visibility for not just their Rockwell products, but other products that are living in their environment as well, whether it's a JCI product or Honeywell or GE or Siemens. To the customer, that doesn't matter so much. They just want to have the ability to discover and identify their products and then take positive action on controls that they can make in that environment to reduce their risk. Exactly.
So with that regard, just the automotive industry is trying to create its own fleet and manage its own cars as part of its own fleet. So they all report to the same vehicle. So similar to what you said, but they're kind of like the provider as well as the customer, right? Assuming they're also going to own the vehicles eventually. So we don't have a lot of time. Just to conclude, the last question for all of you to answer, please, is what is the advice that you would give to other product security officers, right? What would be the KPIs that they should focus on in order to be successful in the results for their own organizations?
So ISO SAE 21434 sets up the organizational requirements for a cybersecurity program. It goes through several points of what should go into such a program. Within that section, section 5 of the document is one very small sentence that is actually quite profound, and is to say that an organization must set their policy and strategies as a part of that cybersecurity program. And so, you know, that would be, I don't know if that becomes a measurable as you're looking for, but that would be a good indicator, a good objective of what to establish early as you begin a cybersecurity management system per ISO SAE 21434 is to set up those policies and strategies for the organization to develop product to.
Thank you. Jürgen, would you like to add?
I mean, it's like Bill said, it's a huge effort and challenge. You really need to be humble. I think a success factor, as told before, is to be cross-functional in the organization and also get your hands dirty if possible.
Thank you. Megan?
Sure. I think it almost goes back to the old adage of to have friends, you have to be a friend, right? And I think that includes understanding whom you want to influence at different levels within the organization, right? Kind of going back to that tiered defense model with the first line of defense, understanding the needs of your internal customers in designing, making, and validating controls before we ship secure and safe products, and then the external customer view, right? In other words, are we making security and safety easier for our customers? Do they feel heard? Are we producing what the market is demanding? And again, it's strategic level KPIs. Are we building and measuring against the right products and risk to our customers? At the operational level, are we complying with the right standards? And then more at the tactical level with KPIs, how many vulnerabilities are we finding? Are we dispositioning and fixing them relatively quickly? Those are very tactical level KPIs that can be employed to understand the overall health of your organization and view the program as a journey and on a spectrum rather as something, you know, that you're either right or wrong. Product security is more about risk management than controls application in many cases.
Thank you. And Jason?
Sure, just three points to end on, and that is that you got to be a partner early and often in the product strategy, and that involves all those functions of legal and engineering and CISO and everybody else. Make sure you're delivering a great experience for both your developers and for your end customers. And then finally, make sure you're always focused on creating value. You know, that's why we're here. That's why this function exists.
That's great. Okay, okay. So thank you very much. Thank you for this great team and panelists. I very much appreciate that. I think it was a great session. We're going to share it with everybody who registered, and they're going to receive a link with the recording of this session. What I love to hear a lot was the very somewhat unified view that all of you have about delivering value, not looking at cybersecurity as taxes or toll, but as something that enables to deliver value to the end customer. And I think it's highly admirable. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.